Let me tell you about one of the craziest experiences I had with a roommate during my first time living away from home. I was fresh out of high school, working a minimum wage job, and finally managed to get my own place with two other people I thought were my friends. Look, I knew living with others would have its challenges, but I wasn't prepared for what was about to unfold. At the time, I was also dealing with some legal troubles. I had to complete a bunch of community service hours at this animal rescue ranch. I spent my days cleaning up after all sorts of animals, from peacocks to potbelly pigs. But the absolute worst were the llamas. Those creatures were demons in disguise. They would spit at you, chase you around, and make these ungodly, screaming noises. And here's something most people don't know. Llamas have this weird habit of all pooping in the same spot. It's like their sacred toilet ground or something, and they get really territorial about it. But my real problem was back at the apartment. One of my roommates, let's call him the food thief, had this infuriating habit of eating everyone else's food. He didn't care what it was or who it belonged to. My biggest grievance? My Reese's Puff cereal. I love that stuff and he kept demolishing entire boxes of it. I tried talking to him multiple times about eating my cereal. He would always act apologetic and claim he didn't know it was mine, promising to replace it. Of course, he never did. This cycle repeated itself with every box he ate. One day, while I was shoveling the llama poop pile at the ranch, I had this moment of brilliant clarity. The llama droppings were these small, light pellets that came in different shades of brown, from light peanut butter color to dark chocolate. They looked exactly like Reese's Puffs cereal. The plan formed instantly. I bought a new box of Reese's Puffs on my way home, carefully emptied the cereal into a container for myself, and filled the bag with llama pellets. I even used a chip clip and rolled the bag exactly how I usually did, placing it in its usual spot on top of the fridge. That night, around 10 p.m., I heard Food Thief's familiar routine. He got up, smoked some weed, as usual, and started his nightly food raid. I sat in my bedroom, listening intently. The kitchen floor creaked under his feet. The cereal bag rustled. The fridge opened for milk. A drawer opened for a spoon. Then he walked to the couch and sat down. I waited for the screaming, the gagging, the realization that he was eating llama poop. Instead, I heard crunching, then more crunching. Then he turned on the TV and kept eating. He was so high that he couldn't tell the difference between cereal and llama droppings. This went on for days. He kept eating the cereal without ever realizing what it was. I was both impressed and disturbed by his complete lack of awareness. Our lease ended up getting terminated about a month later due to various issues with our third roommate. On our last day in the apartment, while we were all moving out, I finally confronted him about the Reese's Puffs he'd been eating the previous month. When I revealed they were actually llama droppings from the ranch, he just stood there in shock. After a moment of stunned silence, he bolted to the bathroom and started throwing up violently. Our other roommate found the whole situation hilarious and couldn't stop laughing. Meanwhile, the food thief emerged from the bathroom, furious and disgusted, demanding to know what was wrong with me. I simply reminded him that he had ignored my multiple requests to stop eating my food. He didn't say another word to me for the rest of the move-out process. He moved back in with his parents and now has a weird aversion to any kind of breakfast cereal. Can't imagine why. I come from a long line of business owners, and this story has been passed down through generations in my family. It all started with my great-great-grandfather, who built his life from nothing after gaining his freedom in the years before the Civil War. He fought in the war alongside a wealthy man who went against his family's wishes to fight for what he believed was right. They formed an unlikely but strong friendship during their service, watching each other's backs through countless battles. My great-great-grandfather even helped carry his friend to safety when he lost his leg in combat. After the war, with his savings and determination, my great-great-grandfather opened a small shop in Boston. He met my great-great-grandmother during the war, and together they turned that shop into something special. We sold everything from basic groceries to tools for workers, and our reputation for fair prices and honest business grew quickly. The neighborhood loved us, and we became a cornerstone of the community. For 10 years, we built our life there, had 3 beautiful children, made countless friends, and thought we'd found our place in the world. Then he showed up. I'll never forget the day that entitled businessman walked into our shop. He'd been a plantation owner before the war, fought for the wrong side, and only switched allegiances when he saw which way the wind was blowing. He'd lost his slaves but managed to keep his wealth by betraying his former allies. The first time he came in, he was all smiles and business talk. He told me he'd been buying up promising shops in the area and that ours had caught his attention. He wanted to discuss what he called a fair price. But then he saw who owned the store. His entire demeanor changed in an instant. His smile disappeared as he suggested that perhaps I should consider something more suitable for my kind, like farm work. He offered to take the establishment off my hands for what he called a reasonable sum. When I told him my shop wasn't for sale, he tried to convince me to be sensible, claiming people like me weren't meant for this kind of work. He offered $5,000 for it. The offer was less than half what the shop was worth. When I left him out, things got ugly. Windows started getting broken. Deliveries went missing. Thugs would come in and harass customers. We endured it all until they went after my oldest boy. He was just 13, walking home from his evening job at the bakery when they jumped him. Beat him so badly he carried the scars for the rest of his life. That's when I knew we had to leave. But I wasn't about to let that entitled man win. As luck would have it, my old war buddy had written to me about a position on his new farm out west. Good pay, a house for my family, and most importantly, respect. The timing couldn't have been better. I went to the businessman's office and told him I'd reconsidered his offer. I explained that the harassment and violence had won, and I would sell. He smugly replied that since I was finally seeing reason, his offer was now only $4,000. Take it or leave it. I countered with $7,500, pointing out that it was 75% of the actual value, and he knew it was a steal. His eyes lit up with greed, thinking he'd broken me. We drew up the contract specifying that ownership would transfer at midnight on the signing date. He was so eager to humiliate me by taking my business that he didn't think about what might happen before midnight. That day, we held the biggest sale our neighborhood had ever seen. Everything went for pennies on the dollar. Tools, food, supplies, all of it to our loyal customers who'd stood by us through the hard times. We even sold the shelving units and counters to other shop owners. At 11:59 p.m. I posted the keys through his office mailbox. By dawn, we were on our way west to start our new life. I heard later that he showed up the next morning with a crew of workers ready to take over his new acquisition. Instead of a thriving business, he found an empty shell. No inventory, no fixtures, not even a delivery schedule since I'd canceled all our contracts. He'd paid $7,500 for 4 walls and a roof. Most of our old customers boycotted any business he tried to open there. The building stood empty for months before he had to sell it at a loss. Meanwhile, my family thrived on my friend's farm. We built a new life free from harassment and prejudice, and I lived to see all 3 of my children grow into successful adults themselves. Let me tell you how I got caught up in this mess with a neighbor from hell and ended up with an unexpected new family member. I'd just landed my dream job as a software developer, and after years of living with roommates, I was finally able to afford renting a house on my own. The place was perfect, quiet neighborhood, decent size, and best of all, pet-friendly. I'd adopted my cat from a shelter 2 years prior, a tailless goofball I called Goblin because of his chaotic energy. He was strictly an indoor cat, and we were perfectly happy that way. Everything was great until I actually moved in. My parents, being the sweethearts they are, drove 3 hours to help me with the move. We had a U-Haul parked in front of my new house, technically blocking a dead-end sidewalk, but it wasn't like we were planning to camp there forever. That's when I first met my neighbor. She came storming out of her house, yelling and demanding to know what we thought we were doing. My mom, sweet as always, turned around with her warm smile and explained that we were just moving me in and would be done in a couple of hours. But Karen wasn't having any of it. She started screaming about how we were ruining the community and that this was a residential area, not a parking lot. My dad tried to calm things down by assuring her we'd be as quick as possible, but she just kept going. She ranted for nearly 30 minutes, longer than we'd even been parked there. Eventually, my parents, being the conflict-avoidant people they are, moved the truck way down the street, making our move significantly more difficult. I soon discovered this wasn't even the worst thing about her. She had this beautiful tabby cat that she treated like a mere pest control device. The poor thing was obviously underfed, and she'd let her grandkids terrorize him on weekends under the guise of playing. The only silver lining was that the cat would come to my porch for food and attention, which I happily provided. Then came the flea incident. My goblin managed to slip outside one day when I was bringing in groceries. I found him after a few hours of panic, but the next morning I discovered an unwelcome visitor, a flea. If my indoor cat had fleas, I was certain her outdoor cat was infested too. Despite our history, I decided to be neighborly and warn her. When I knocked on her door, she opened it with a nasty scowl. I tried to nicely explain about my cat getting fleas and warned her that her cat might have them too. But instead of being grateful for the warning, she immediately started yelling at me. She called me irresponsible for letting my cat get fleas and bragged about how spotless her house was compared to my supposedly filthy one. She insisted her cat couldn't possibly have fleas. I pointed out that she'd never even been in my house and that's not how fleas work, but she just kept yelling as I walked away. I couldn't stop thinking about her poor cat, who I kept seeing scratching himself raw. I wanted to help him, but she'd start screaming if I even looked at him now. That's when I remembered something interesting I'd overheard her bragging about. She was keeping her cat a secret from our landlord to avoid paying pet rent. The same landlord who'd recently replaced all her carpet because she claimed to have cat allergies. The same landlord who was extremely strict about pest control. I made the call. When I told the landlord about the flea problem with my cat, I made sure to mention that I'd noticed my neighbor's cat scratching a lot too. There was a long pause when he realized she had a cat. That's when I learned she'd not only scammed him into replacing her carpet with her fake allergy claim, but had also been dodging pet rent the entire time. When the exterminator was scheduled, I might have accidentally removed the notice from her door so she couldn't hide the evidence. The day of reckoning was beautiful. From my open window, I heard the whole thing. She tried to prevent them from entering, claiming she never got any notice. The landlord told her this was a scheduled inspection and to step aside. She stuttered and protested, but it was useless. The evidence of her cat was everywhere. Food bowls, litter box, cat hair. 2 weeks later, she was given notice to vacate. In her spite, she left her cat behind, probably thinking she was punishing me since she'd seen me feeding him. Little did she know that was the best gift she could have given me. The tabby, now flea-free and properly fed, became the perfect brother for Goblin. My house may not be spotless by Karen standards, but it's filled with love, purrs, and 2 very happy cats. 6 years ago, my life was at its lowest point financially. After my mother got sick and needed constant care, I had to drop out of college to help support the family. The only job I could find was working at a warehouse, packing boxes for minimum wage. The work was mind-numbing, but at least it was full-time and had health insurance. Between helping with mom's medical bills and keeping a roof over our heads, I barely had enough left for basic necessities. I usually skipped lunch to save money. A pack of cigarettes lasted me a week since I rationed them carefully, taking just 1 smoke break per shift to maintain my sanity. The warehouse was in an industrial area with several small restaurants nearby, and the smell of food would torture me during my breaks as I watched others walk by with their takeout bags. That day started like any other. I was taking my smoke break in the designated area behind the building when something caught my eye, a rewards card lying on the ground. I picked it up and realized it was a fully stamped card from the local Italian restaurant down the street. 10 stamps, all neatly lined up, promising a free meal complete with pasta, salad, and a drink. I checked both sides of the card carefully, looking for any catch or fine print, but there weren't any conditions listed besides presenting the card for redemption. When lunch break came, I practically ran to the restaurant. I only had 30 minutes, and our supervisor was strict about punch times. The place was completely empty when I walked in, with just an older woman standing at the host station. Through the kitchen door, I could hear the clattering of pots and pans and smell the rich aroma of tomato sauce, making my stomach growl audibly. I approached the counter and politely requested a to-go order using the rewards card. The woman took one look at me, probably noting my warehouse uniform and worn-out shoes, and her face twisted into a scowl. She immediately told me that the offer was for dine-in only. When I questioned this, pointing out that there were no such restrictions listed on the card, she simply repeated that it was their policy, becoming more stern with each word. Her voice carried that certain tone that people use when they think they're better than you. I looked around the empty restaurant and checked my watch. 25 minutes left. After a moment's thought, I told her that, in that case, I would like a table instead. I could see her internal struggle as she realized she had no legitimate reason to refuse me service. Her expression soured even more, but she grabbed a menu and led me to a table, practically throwing it down in front of me. I ordered exactly what the card offered: spaghetti with marinara sauce, house salad, and a soft drink. Each time she brought something to the table, she wore this artificial smile that didn't reach her eyes. The other staff members watched our interaction from a distance, some looking sympathetic, others simply staying out of it. After delivering everything, she asked in a falsely sweet tone if everything was to my satisfaction and if I needed anything else. When I requested some to-go boxes, her fake smile vanished instantly. She turned on her heel without a word and disappeared into the kitchen, muttering something under her breath. A few moments later, a younger server brought out the boxes, offering an apologetic smile. I packed everything carefully but quickly, making sure not to spill anything. The pasta went into one container, the remaining salad into another, and I even poured my drink into a to-go cup. I could feel the woman glaring at me from across the restaurant as I gathered my things. Other customers had started to arrive for lunch, watching the scene unfold with curious expressions. I left the rewards card on the table and walked out with my head held high, hearing the woman complaining loudly to another server about people taking advantage. Back at work, I saved the meal for my afternoon break. Sitting in the break room, I savored every bite of that spaghetti. The sauce was rich and flavorful, the noodles perfectly cooked, and even the slightly wilted salad tasted amazing. My co-workers commented on how good it smelled, and I shared the story with them, earning a few laughs and high fives for my creative solution. Maybe it was because I was so hungry, or perhaps it was the satisfaction of outsmarting that condescending woman, but it really was the best free spaghetti I've ever had. The next day, I noticed they'd put up a new sign in their window specifying that reward redemptions were dine-in only. But it was worth it. For one brief moment, I managed to beat a system that always seemed stacked against me, and I did it by following their own rules to the letter. Sometimes I still drive past that restaurant and smile, remembering the look on that woman's face when I asked for the to-go boxes. It might have been just a small victory, but when you're down and out, those small victories mean everything.